Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transportation Talks. Transportation Talks is sponsored by the Transportation and Supply Chain Institute at the University of Denver. My name is Michelle Livingstone, and I have the privilege of serving as the moderator for Transportation Talks. We invite industry leaders across all modes of transportation to join us. And today I'm particularly excited because we have Matt Cox, the chairman and CEO of Matson Inc. And I'm very excited to hear his story. Matt, please join me on camera.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Oh, Matt, thank you. I'm doing really well. And aloha, I should have probably started off as.
Thank you.
So
Aloha.
we're glad to have you today. Thank you so much for taking time out. So maybe you could just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you went to school, and how you got into this crazy industry.
Okay, sure. Happy to do it and happy to be here. So thanks for giving me the opportunity. So I went to school at UC Berkeley and graduated with a degree in accounting and finance. So I started off on a finance track, went to work for one of the then Big Eight accounting firms. And after a couple of years, decided that was not what I wanted to do as a career and went to work for one of the companies that I was on the audit for, which was at the time American President Lines. So I worked for APL for just under 15 years. Started off in financial roles and then moved into operating roles. I was managing director for West Asia, which included Africa, the Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent. And after about 15 years, I got a call from Matson, who was their CFO was retiring at the time. And I decided to come and work for Matson. I had, this was about just under 25 years ago. I started in as the CFO, but after 4 or 5 years, they gave me an opportunity to move on to the operating side. So I've had a number of different operating roles, including the chief operating officer, the president, and then became CEO. We were spun off from, Matson was spun off from our longtime Hawaii-based public company, Alexander and Baldwin, about 13 years ago. We became our own New York Stock Exchange separately listed company. And so I was retained that role as the chairman and CEO, and that's where I am today. So it's been a really fun journey. I look back on it. If you look back in my history, my grandfather was a marine architect, and my great-grandfather was a ship captain. So I like to think that I have some of it in my blood. I didn't quite exactly know at the time the linkages, but as you said in your comments, the transportation industry is fun, exciting, ever-changing, challenging, all of that. So it's been a wonderful, interesting career, and I'm just so fortunate to be part of the Matson organization.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, I'm glad that you're enjoying it, and I'm glad you're still in it. So tell us a little bit more about Matson. I
Okay.
think most folks just think of Matson as West Coast to Hawaii company, but I know you're so much more. So tell us what's going
Sure.
on.
Yeah. And so Matson was founded by William Matson, who was in 1882, so 142 years ago. He was an orphan, left Sweden on a ship, made his way to San Francisco, and started this company between San Francisco and the Kingdom of Hawaii on through various vessels, including a four-masted schooner as the state grew from a kingdom to a territory to a state. So and Matson has sort of been there from the beginning in serving Hawaii. When I joined almost 25 years ago, Matson, it would be fair to say that Matson was primarily a U.S. West Coast to Hawaii ocean carrier. The majority of its revenue and operating results were tied into the serving of the Hawaiian economy. And when I arrived, it was clear we had a very large market share presence in a very slow growing finite market. And if we were going to grow, it was not probably by growing more in Hawaii. So we began to look at ways in which to grow. And so we've, over these last 23 years, started a service from the West Coast to China, first through Guam, and Okinawa, and we have services from China. We now have multiple sailings from week. I can talk a little bit more about that later. We acquired the Alaska business from Horizon Lines, so now we're the Jones Act, one of the two primary Jones Act carriers into Alaska. We acquired businesses in the South Pacific, and we also have a ports and terminals joint venture that operate 8 marine terminals on the U.S. West Coast with Carrick's company that both operates Matson's dedicated terminals on the West Coast, but also have 4 terminals that are used by international ocean carriers to load and unload their ships. And then importantly, Matson has grown a separate sister company, Matson Logistics, which is the rail and truck brokerage warehousing. We're freight forwarding. We've grown that business very substantially over the last 25 years. So, we've grown from maybe an $800 million a year in revenue carrier to a $4.5 billion in ocean revenue. And same with our market cap. 12 years ago, we were $800 or $900 million market cap, and now we're at $4.5 billion in market cap. So we've been able to grow over 25 years, but since we spun off, we've grown rather substantially. So it's been a really fun journey.
Well, that's great. Congratulations on that growth. That's not always easy to achieve. And I like how you've stayed with your niche, but you've expanded it. So it's kind of like remain core to your true north, but certainly have an opportunity to expand. So that's really exciting. So you mentioned about the Jones Act. The Jones Act is really can be a controversial topic sometimes. And for those who may not be familiar with the Jones Act, if I reach back into my transportation 101 class, it was really, I believe it was right after World War I, it was enacted, and it was to help the U.S. economy, and it was thought to be much more safe with national security to have a carrier that was completely United States citizen, owned, operated, built, and all of that. When things are going well, no one gets too excited about it. But if there's some issue that crops up, then it comes back around and say, well, should we allow foreign vessels to also serve, the Hawaii, Guam, and Puerto Rico, et cetera? So what is your thought about the Jones Act? And I'd love your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. We get questions like that from investors, from customers, but so if you look at the Jones Act, that, as you said, that was enacted in its current form in the 1920s, but if you look further back to the Second Continental Congress, which reserved shipping basically since the founding of our country. So and the other thing, we call it the Jones Act, but another word for it is a cabotage, which reserves shipping between points in or within a country's possessions to the flag of that country. And if you look at the top 75 economies in the world, the vast, vast majority, 90+% of countries around the world, industrialized countries around the world, reserve shipping for its own flag territory. So it's a very common globally set of rules. It also has different forms. So for example, in the US airline industry, you can't fly between 2 points in the United States unless you're a US flag carrier. International carriers can land in the United States, but you can't fly from San Francisco to Chicago on Japan Airlines. It's reserved. So it takes its form in different ways. But to your point about the critics and the supporters of the Jones Act, we in the Jones Act enjoy wide bipartisan support in Congress and the last 6 or 7 presidential administrations. And in my simplified take, Republicans like the idea of national defense, of trained U.S. citizen mariners in time of a national emergency. Because the Jones Act requires the ships be built in the United States, it keeps the U.S. shipyard infrastructure intact. That allows and much of the ships that we buy are built in dual use, that is Navy and commercial shipyards. So it helps to provide employment opportunity for those shipbuilders. The Democrats have traditionally liked the high wage, unionized, middle class jobs and the opportunity that it creates. And so what we find is when we go to Congress and would tell our story to a new member of Congress, it tends to show a lot of interest by members of both parties. So, the questions are asked time to time. It's a very old law. Is it still relevant? We think it really is. I would just make another point. During the pandemic, there was, as we all know and have felt, especially for customers, all the pain around all the congestion that occurred during the pandemic. And what we found, whether it was in Puerto Rico, Alaska, Hawaii, I know for our services in Hawaii and Alaska, we did not miss a single sailing in 3 years. And so, in the midst of the congestion, in part because we had our own dedicated terminals and our competitors in the different Jones Act trades, were able to operate in a very normal way to be able to keep cargo flowing to these remote territories that really depend on a regular service. So just a couple of ideas about it.
Yeah, no, that I really appreciate the explanation on that. But I am curious, if the Jones Act did go away, would you have any different operating ideas than what you're currently doing? Or do you feel like the services that you're providing in the lanes that you're in, even if Jones Act didn't exist, you'd stay in your lane, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would stay in our lanes. I would think that if there were lower cost competitors that entered the markets that, don't pay U.S. taxes, don't employ U.S. citizen crews, I think there would be price competition and it would be a disruptive period. But I think, we have strong market positions in all these markets, and, I'm sure it would be disruptive, but I think we certainly would, we think we're good at what we do and would continue.
Yeah, well, I think you've got a great track record of being resilient. So I'm sure there have been many
And
hurdles.
honestly, just to repeat a note, I really don't see, I don't see that happening. I just, there's just so much support in Congress and presidential administrations. People understand that while it's a niche part of our network, it's an important part of our network. And why would we turn over, whether it's up the Mississippi, the Great Lakes, and all the other elements, would we be turning these jobs over to foreign crews? It's just not something that I think would ever happen.
Well, and you're most likely absolutely correct. I believe I read the stat that 650,000 jobs in the
Yes,
U.S. are tied to this part of the
our
maritime
industry. Yeah, so it's an important contributor too.
Yeah, it is. It is. But, it's election year. Who knows what's
Yeah,
going to
and
happen?
people ask, right? I mean, it's a fair question, and especially for an old law, is it still relevant? And we think it is.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. All right, so let's talk about sustainability. Matson launched the first sustainability report 4 years ago, and sustainability is a real challenge. I know, being from Home Depot, it was very important to us because it was important to our customers. As a customer of Home Depot to Matson, we also want service providers also to be as focused on sustainability as what we are. So tell us what the sustainability journey has been for you.
Yeah, it's been interesting. And just like you at Home Depot, we were asked the same thing, as you said in your intro, by customers like Home Depot, by investors. Hey, what, and we're in the transportation business. We're emitting emissions as part of, especially whether you're in air or ocean, we're consuming fuel to carry our heavy loads. And what was our goal? What were we trying to do? And so we, it's interesting. There were parts of it where we looked at what we were doing. We felt we needed to be more ambitious in setting our own goals. And it was 4 years ago, we set a scope 1 reduction in CO2 40% by 2030. So we set that 4 years ago. And so we have been active in working our way through that. We published our most recent fourth sustainability report. We're about 20% there towards our 40% goal by 2030. We're in the process of building 3 new vessels. We have converted a number of 4 vessels or potentially 5 vessels. We have the opportunity to convert from conventional fuels to LNG. And the tankage that we're using, we believe we're starting with LNG because it's available at scale. It consumes about 20% or emits 20% less CO2 than conventional fuels. We're also using alternative fuels, hydrogenated vegetable oil, other clean diesels, and things like that that have a really good footprint. And we believe we're going to get to our 40% goal. And it's been a challenge. It's required a bunch of investment, but it's obvious that the climate is changing, and it's obvious everybody has to play their role in reducing our carbon footprint. I think that's one of the ways we do. Conceptually, it's an interesting question. So at the time, we said, because LNG is considered a transition fuel, it emits less CO2. But the question for us at the time was, do we do nothing and wait for these drop-in fuels, or do we take a baby step or a step in the right direction towards reducing our footprint instead of waiting for the perfect fuel to arrive without investment? So our own decision was, let's start our journey, and we think a 40% reduction is meaningful. And obviously, our belief and hope is that these alternative fuels are going to come to help us get the rest of the way there by 2050.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's hard to wait till you get everything, a perfect answer out there. So
Yeah.
learn from what you know, and then hopefully it'll continue to evolve.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's great. So what about on the ESG front, kind of the
Yeah.
talk about the social part and the diversity part? I know Matson's taken an active interest and role in that, and I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, sure. Be happy to. These other elements, as you point out, are just as important. And so, really in the area of diversity in the ESG, we've made a significant amount of effort. We've expanded our executive leadership and development programs, and we'll talk about DU a little bit later, but for opening up opportunities for high potential to participate and grow. So we've really beefed up our executive leadership and development programs. We've also rolled out some diversity leadership scholarship programs at transportation programs around the United States, with alumni leading the scholarship programs. We've started a number of employee resource groups based on direct feedback from our employees. We've also updated our performance management system to do check-ins for a greater focus on career development. And then importantly, we've done audits of both gender and racial pay to make sure that while we think we're looking specifically at our own programs to make sure that we're paying people who do the same work the same. And so it's been interesting because we've really been focused. We don't have a specific goal on of women or minorities, but we've said generally we'd like our management team's mix to look a lot like our employee base. And we operate in places, for example, in Hawaii that has it's one of the most diverse economy or populations in the country. And we track on how close we are getting towards creating opportunities for both women and minorities. And of course, transportation is a very male-dominated industry where Matson is about 70% union of our base. And so the question is, how do we bring women more prominent in the leadership roles? And so we've been really active and I think making really good progress there over the last few years. The other thing we do on a regular basis is to do check-ins with our employees by using engagement surveys, and we're in the process of completing one over the last couple of months. We were proud of the fact that we've had 85% participation of our employees in these surveys. And what the survey companies tell us, vendors we've used, is if you can get 50 to 60% employees to respond to these things, that's a good standard. But what it meant to us is that people will take the time to give us feedback in helping us to figure out not only how we're doing, but most importantly what we can do to help. And we're proud of the fact that in our last survey, 86% of those who responded, which is about 85% of those who worked, rated Matson a great place to work. And so, but it's easy to say, wow, that's great. There's not a lot we need to do, but we had an open-ended section for, hey, what are some ways we can improve? And we got 1,800 suggestions, which is fabulous, right? It's like people, they like working here, and we want to do more. So we're really quite proud of this. We're not the biggest company, but we really work hard at whether it's communication, and we have regular town halls and other ways in which we're always checking how our communication strategies, and are they working? Are they getting tired? Do they need to be revamped? And so we do invest a ton of time in communication and trying to make this a good place to work.
Well, clearly your associates have responded positively. When you get that type of response on a voice of the associate, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're taking those 1,800 comments and trying to decipher those and figuring out how to prioritize those, which is awesome.
Yeah, and it's what we do, because we can be as good as we think we are. There's always room for improvement, right? That's just true everywhere.
Well, transportation is a tough industry, and it is just inherently difficult to attract the diversity that I think most of us would like to see in the business. So, but it's that type of focus that will really make a difference. So I applaud your efforts. Thank you.
Thanks.
This is a personal passion of mine. So I'm very happy to hear what you're doing about that. So thank you for that. So let's talk about University of Denver. Matson has been a tremendous supporter of the Transportation and Supply Chain Institute at the University of Denver, and we really, really, truly appreciate your support. And some great folks have come through the program and have gone on to do wonderful things. I know right now we have Keith Crenshaw on our board. He was a graduate a few years ago and has done just attended his first board meeting, and so that was great. But can you tell us a little bit why you feel that Matson has continued to support and invest in their high potential talent going to the University of Denver through
Yeah,
the
so the 25 years I've been here, that's been part of our, we identify emerging leaders, and this has been one of our key programs to send future leaders to this program. And it's been interesting because we've grown with the program over the years and with the leaders. But just in talking to our graduates, they're so enthusiastic. They feel that it was so worth their time, and giving people with a lot of potential this educational background where they can take some time away from work. The professors are outstanding. They're teaching them real world items. They get to hone their leadership abilities. And I think I think of all of the pieces of this that's most heartening to me, and the things that I've heard consistently, is the ability to interface with others in the industry and build or expand their peer network, so that they, and people keep in touch, and everyone has good ideas, and people regularly are communicating with the alumni in their cohorts as their careers move, within Matson or Matson Logistics, and keep in touch with people that are working in complementary industries or customers and those kinds of things. So it's the quality of the program, it's the ability to teach new skills, and it's the peer cohort that are really drivers of making this program so successful over the years, in my opinion.
That's great. Thank you, Matt, for that. And let's just talk about Matson's culture a little bit. So is that continuous learning an important part and component of the culture, or maybe you could just talk about the culture in general?
Yeah. And each of us in our own worlds have a distinct culture, right? But culture is so important. And I've worked for a few different companies. And the thing that I like about Matson's culture, I'll give you just a little bit of an example. So my job's based in Honolulu. These days, I'm there about 1 week a month. And to this day, if a vessel is delayed, and there's no milk in the milk carton section or the milk section, they hang a sign up saying Matson ship is late, no milk today. So there is in a
A lot of
way,
accountability.
yeah, it's an accountability. It's in our culture. We're serving these remote economies, first Hawaii and then Alaska and other things. And what it allows us to do is to have a unrelenting focus on on-time departures, on-time arrivals, and it matters. So we've set for ourselves a on-time target within 59 minutes of the scheduled arrival. Because, if, for example, in Hawaii, I'll use an example elsewhere in a moment, but there were trucks lined up at our gate that there's not much warehouse infrastructure in Hawaii because land is so expensive. So the vast majority, 90+%, go directly to an individual store to be unloaded. And it goes that morning and it's delivered and people go shopping. And if there's some snag, it's not there. And so there's this culture of on like it's, and I don't want to say an obsession, a healthy obsession. It's all, we meet every morning. We find out where every one of our vessels are. Do we have an issue? How did this port work last night? Did it achieve its goals for unloading the ship? Is our gate turn time less than 20 minutes? So the cargo moves quickly outside of our gates. And so that's an element of our culture that we'll get back to in a moment. But the other part of the culture that's been infused because of our Hawaii origin, we call it an aloha culture. But what I mean by that is, is people work really hard on this on time, but it's a very collaborative culture. There's a kindness in which we operate. I mean, we have problems all the time. We're in transportation. We've got to solve them. But there's an understanding and a mutual respect that permeates our culture, which I think is one of the reasons why people think it's a great place to work. But bulls in a china shop do not last in our company. It's not the loudest. It's not we're going to work through this, and there's a mutual respect, and it's a very special culture. But what we found is, as we've expanded, and from our Hawaii roots, whether it's in Alaska or whether importantly it's in China, we've applied those same on-time metrics and focus on delivering to those markets. Horizon Line's acquisition of the Horizon Line Alaska, fortunately, the culture was very similar in terms of how reliable. What was interesting for us as we expanded into the international trades, it's less critical that cargo arrive on time for some reason that's unclear to us. So we said we're going to be the fastest and most reliable. We're a small player in these very giant markets in China, but we are, without exaggeration, the go-to carrier if you've got a production problem, if you've got a late order, if you're trying to take some cargo out of air freight and move it at a fraction of the cost of air freight. We're the go-to carrier in the central China markets we serve, and it's allowed us to be very successful. But it's, I think, from the cultural roots of people notice whether you show up on time, and if you don't, they're going to call you on it by putting your name on a milk container. So that's a little insight into our culture, which makes us, we think, unique and different from other places that I've worked.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, I always like to quote Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think it's really true. And the tone that you set permeates through the entire organization. And I believe that on-time performance is critical to success for everyone. So again, applaud you for that. So that's wonderful. And because in transportation, we believe starting and ending on time, unfortunately, we have come to the close of our conversation, but I have truly appreciated it. And Matt, thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise with us, and look forward to seeing you out and about in the industry. And again, thank you for your support of the University of Denver Transportation Supply Chain Institute.
Thank you.
Oh, no, that's great. For the rest of the audience, I just want to let you know that this interview, along with all of the ones I have conducted, and which this is my eighth one. So we've heard from the likes of Shelley Simpson and Katie Farmer and Mark Rourke and Joe Hendricks and a whole host of great folks. They're all available out on YouTube, and they're also available on the University of Denver Transportation Supply Chain Institute website and on your favorite social media platform. So I encourage you to continue to check in with those if you've missed any of those. And on that note, Matt, we'll say aloha to you. Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you in the near future.